step out.
Officer, this is my car.
Sure it is. Last warning, step out.
Before you make this worse, or before you do?
Need a second unit. Possible stolen vehicle.
The dashcam light blinked red. Not bright, not dramatic. Just a steady little pulse in the corner of the windshield that said, "Everything is being recorded." Dr. Julian Carter kept both hands on the steering wheel, fingers spread, palms open. The way you do when you're trying to look harmless in a moment that shouldn't require harmlessness. The officer leaned into the driver's window like the glass belonged to him. "Step out," he said. Julian didn't move, not because he was refusing, because he was trying to understand what world he'd just slipped into. "Officer," he said carefully, "this is my car." The officer's eyes flicked over Julian's face, and then away, already bored of his explanation. "Sure it is," he replied, and with those two words, a routine traffic stop became something else, a challenge, a test, a moment where reality was treated like an argument. "Turn the engine off," the officer ordered. "It is off," Julian said. "Don't get smart," the officer snapped. Julian's throat tightened. He could hear traffic rushing past on the boulevard, the low roar of tires on wet pavement. A distant siren wailed and faded. Somewhere behind the officer, a second patrol car rolled in, slow, like backup, arriving for a threat. Julian glanced down at the emblem on the steering wheel, a brand new luxury sedan, leased in his name, registered to his home, insured through his hospital's group policy. And yet, in the officer's posture, he felt it, the certainty, not certainty based on evidence, certainty based on expectation. "Last warning," the officer said. "Step out before you make this worse." Julian swallowed. His voice stayed calm, but the words carried the kind of weight you only hear when a person is trying to protect both their dignity and their life. "Before you make this worse," he repeated quietly. "Or before you do?" The officer's jaw tightened, and the dashcam kept blinking, because in the months that followed, that blinking red light became the city's biggest problem. It turned an accusation into a timeline into evidence, and evidence into a lawsuit that would balloon into $4.5 million. Rewind. To the night, Julian Carter had no idea he was about to be treated like a suspect in his own life. It was late, not midnight late, doctor late. The kind of late where time stops meaning much, because the hospital clock doesn't care what your body wants. Julian had finished a complicated procedure just after 9 p.m., a vascular repair on a patient who came in bleeding and terrified, a surgery that demanded focus so total it left you hollow after. When he finally peeled his gloves off and stepped away from the table, his shoulders felt like they'd been holding the whole building up. He changed out of scrubs, still smelling faintly of antiseptic, and walked through the quiet back hallway of the hospital where the lights are. Dimmer, and the walls carry the weight of too many nights like this. He didn't check his phone, he didn't scroll, he just wanted to get home. Outside, the city had turned damp. A thin rain misted the streetlights and made every surface shine. Julian crossed the employee lot, clicked his key fob, and watched his car's headlights blink back. A little greeting, a little promise of comfort. He slid into the seat, exhaled, and let the heater warm his hands as he pulled out. He took the route he always took, down Elmwood, across the bridge. 2 turns, 1 long straightaway, a quiet drive, until red and blue lights ignited behind him. Julian signaled and eased to the curb. Smooth, controlled, the way you do when you don't want to give anyone a reason. He put the car in park. He rolled the window down halfway. He placed his hands on the wheel. All the rituals, all the precautions. The officer approached slow, flashlight slicing through the rain. His nameplate, read, Hollis, early 30s, clean uniform, the kind of confidence that comes from knowing people rarely challenge you. "License and registration," Hollis said. Julian nodded. "Of course. They're in my wallet and the glove box. I'm going to reach." "Don't reach," Hollis snapped. Julian froze. A beat. Then Hollis added, "Tell me why I stopped you." Julian blinked. I don't know, officer. Was I speeding?" Hollis leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "This car came back as possibly stolen." The words landed like ice water. Julian's stomach dropped. "That's not possible," he said. "It's my car." Hollis's mouth curled slightly, not a smile, something colder. "Uh-huh," he said. Julian's mind flashed through possibilities. A database error, a typo, a plate misread, something fixable. "Officer," Julian said, "I can show you my insurance card. I can show you the registration. It's in the glove box. It's my name." Hollis lifted his flashlight, aimed it at Julian's face like he was searching for guilt. "Step out," he repeated. Julian swallowed. He could feel his pulse in his throat. And somewhere inside him, the surgeon's brain started doing what it always does. Assess, stabilize, control variables. But this wasn't an operating room. Here the variables had guns. Julian did step out, slowly, carefully. He kept his hands visible. Rain collected on his hair and ran down his collar. Hollis moved him toward the rear of the car. "Hands on the trunk," Hollis ordered. Julian complied, cold metal under his palms. He stared at the wet street reflecting the patrol lights like broken neon. "Why do you think it's stolen?" Julian asked, voice tight. Hollis didn't answer. He patted Julian down with the kind of rough efficiency that felt less like procedure and more like humiliation. Then he reached for his radio. "Confirm possible stolen," Hollis said. "Occupant claims ownership, requesting verification." Julian turned his head slightly. "My name is Dr. Julian Carter. I work at St. Anselm Medical. I just left the hospital. I can call—" Hollis cut him off. "No phone," he said. Julian's jaw clenched. That single rule, no phone, has ended so many conversations before they can become clarity. It isolates you, it keeps your world small, and it keeps the officer's narrative in charge. A second unit arrived. Officer Dana Price, older than Hollis, more cautious. She stepped out into the rain, looked at Julian, looked at the car, and her eyes narrowed as if she could sense the imbalance. "What's the situation?" she asked. Hollis answered quickly. "Vehicle flagged. He's saying it's his. Doesn't have ID in hand." Julian tried to speak. "Officer," he started. Hollis snapped. "Don't talk." Price's gaze flicked to Hollis. A look, not a reprimand, not yet, just a note. Then she looked at Julian. "Sir," she asked, measured, "do you have your driver's license?" Julian exhaled, grateful for a sentence that sounded human. "It's in my wallet," he said. "In my back pocket. I told him that." Price nodded once. "Hollis," she said, "let him retrieve it slowly." Hollis hesitated. Then, like he was granting a favor, he said, "Slow. 2 fingers." Julian reached, pulled out his wallet, opened it, gave them the license. Price read the name, read the address, looked at Julian, then looked back at Hollis. "Hollis," she said quietly, "this is him." Hollis's face didn't change, not relief, not embarrassment, just irritation, like a story he wanted was slipping away. "That doesn't prove the car is his," Hollis said. Price blinked. "It matches the address on the registration, if we check it." Hollis's flashlight swung to the glove box. "Open it," he demanded. Julian's hands tensed. "Officer," he said, "I can open it, but you told me not to reach." Hollis's tone hardened. "Stop talking and open it." Julian moved carefully, opened the glove box, and pulled out the registration packet. His name, Printed. Clear. He held it out. Price took it. Hollis didn't. He stared at the paper like it was a trick. Fake documents, he muttered. Julian's head snapped slightly. Fake? Price looked up sharply. Hollis. But Hollis had committed. And commitment is dangerous when ego is involved, because once you decide someone is guilty, every piece of evidence becomes suspicious. Here's the moment the dashcam made impossible to ignore, because Julian's car had a forward-facing dashcam, not installed for drama, installed for insurance, a small device near the rearview mirror, always on, always recording. Hollis didn't notice it, or he didn't care. But the lens caught everything. The way Hollis's tone escalated, the way he dismissed evidence without reading it, the way he said fake documents before verifying anything, and it caught the moment that would become the center of the lawsuit. Hollis called for a tow. "Control, I need a tow for stolen vehicle recovery," he said. Julian's breath caught. "Tow?" he said. "Officer, you can't. This is my car. I have the registration in your hand." Price stepped in. "Hold on," she said. "We haven't verified the VIN. We haven't run." Hollis cut her off. "I'm not letting a stolen vehicle drive off," he said. Price's voice went firmer. "Then verify it." Hollis's eyes flashed, and then he did something that shifted the whole incident from incompetence to potential malice. He accused Julian of lying. "You stole it," Hollis said. And when Julian reacted, just a half step, just disbelief, Hollis snapped his hand to his weapon, not drawing it, but touching it, a threat without words. Price saw it. The dashcam saw it. And Julian froze in place, like a man who understood exactly how quickly a night can become a funeral. At that point, the stop had already crossed a line, because even if there had been an error in the system, the proper response was verification, not accusation, not intimidation, not towing a man's car while he stood in the rain holding proof. Price called it out, not loudly, but clearly. "Hollis," she said, "step back. Let me run the VIN." Hollis's jaw clenched. "Fine," he said, like he was being forced to do unnecessary work. Price walked to the driver's side, read the VIN, ran it through her unit. Seconds passed, then her face shifted. Not surprise? Confirmation? She turned. "It's registered to him," she said. "No theft report. Nothing." The rain seemed to get louder. Julian's shoulders loosened a fraction. Finally. Hollis stared at Price, then at Julian, then back at Price, and instead of apologizing, he said something that revealed the truth beneath all of it. "Well," Hollis muttered, "it sure looked suspicious." Suspicious. A word that can mean anything. A word that can mean nothing. A word that, in the wrong hands, can be a weapon. Julian didn't shout. He didn't lecture. He didn't demand a badge number. He asked a question that sounded simple, but landed like a scalpel. What exactly looked suspicious? Hollis didn't answer, because the real answer wasn't about the car. It was about the man standing next to it. Price handed the registration back. She looked at Julian with something close to apology in her eyes. "Sir," she said quietly, "you're free to go." Julian nodded once, then he pointed up toward the dashcam. "You know that recorded everything, right?" he asked. Hollis's face changed for the first time. A flicker, not remorse, alarm. Julian drove home. But he didn't feel like he was driving away from danger. He felt like he was carrying it. The patrol lights followed him in his head. The touch on the weapon, the word suspicious, and the way evidence had bounced off the officer like rain off pavement. He got inside, sat at his kitchen table, and stared at his hands, hands that had stitched arteries, hands that had held life steady, hands that had just been ordered onto cold metal like a criminal. He didn't sleep. Instead, he pulled the dashcam file, watched it once, then again, and in the quiet of his home, he realized the most dangerous part wasn't Hollis's accusation. It was Hollis's confidence. The next day, Julian reported it, first to the department, then to the hospital's legal counsel, then, after careful thought, to his own attorney. Not because he wanted money, because he understood what institutions do. They minimize, they reframe, they turn "you stole it" into "we had concerns." They turn fake documents into "we needed verification." They turn a weapon touch into officer safety, unless you have evidence. Julian had evidence, and when the city requested the footage, and when the attorneys watched Hollis dismiss paperwork without reading it, the posture of the case changed, because the city wasn't just facing a complaint, it was facing a recording. Internal Affairs opened an investigation. Hollis wrote an incident report that used familiar phrases: suspicious behavior, non-compliance, high crime area, officer safety. Words that sound neutral until you compare them to video, because the video showed compliance, the video showed calm, the video showed an officer escalating anyway, and that gap between the report and the reality became its own problem. Here's the twist that turned this into a major lawsuit. The stop didn't originate from a stolen vehicle alert. Not exactly. It originated from a license plate reader hit. A partial match. An algorithmic suggestion. A system designed to catch stolen cars, but notorious for false positives when plates are similar. The proper protocol was simple: confirm, verify, double-check. Hollis skipped those steps. He treated the hit like certainty, and once he treated it like certainty, he treated Julian like a thief. Julian's lawsuit didn't just argue bias, it argued negligence, failure to verify, unlawful detention, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and it pointed to the moment Hollis called him a car thief on a public street, because that accusation doesn't just disappear, people hear it, they remember, they look at you differently. Public reaction flared when a clipped version of the dashcam footage surfaced. A man in a dress shirt and hospital ID, an officer saying, "You stole it," a calm voice asking, "What exactly looked suspicious?" And the officer's silence. It spread for the same reason these stories always spread. Because the pattern feels familiar, because people have lived it, because they know how quickly a mundane moment can become dangerous when an officer decides you don't belong in your own life. The city tried to settle quietly, offer an apology, offer training. But Julian refused to let it become a memo and a handshake. He wanted policy change. He wanted the license plate reader protocol tightened. He wanted discipline that meant something, and he wanted a public record. Because if a surgeon with a hospital ID and registration papers could be accused of stealing his own car, then the threshold for suspicion was too low, and the cost of that suspicion was too high. Depositions made it worse. Hollis was asked why he dismissed the registration. He said it could be forged. He was asked why he called for a tow before verifying the VIN. He said he didn't want to risk flight. He was asked why he touched his weapon. He said he felt threatened. When asked what Julian did that was threatening, Hollis described tone. Not movement, not a weapon. Tone. In the cold language of litigation, that is how bias often appears. Not as a slur, as a feeling treated as evidence. The city's attorneys watched the footage and did the math. A jury, a dashcam, a calm surgeon, an officer using words like fake documents and "you stole it," an officer touching his weapon, and a partner officer having to step in to verify what should have been verified first. That's not a good case to take to trial. Not when cameras exist, not when the narrative is already on tape. The settlement number, $4.5 million, didn't appear overnight. It grew as the risk grew, as policy failures became visible, as prior complaints surfaced, because the deeper the attorneys dug, the more they found that Hollis wasn't new to escalation. There were earlier stops, earlier reports, earlier complaints about tone. Not always sustained, not always enough to end a career, but enough to show a pattern, and patterns are what juries understand. The agreement, like most municipal settlements, came with careful language. No admission, no confession. But it came with changes, updated plate reader verification protocols, mandatory supervisor review for stolen vehicle, stops where ownership is immediately asserted, a requirement that registration documents be read and verified before any tow request, body-worn camera audits focusing on escalation language, and additional training framed as best practices. Julian didn't celebrate. He didn't do a victory lap. He returned to surgery. He returned to the part of life where decisions are measured in heartbeats and millimeters. But he carried something forward, a sharper awareness, a reminder that outside the hospital, the world can still decide what you are before you speak. If you're wondering what the worst part was for him, it wasn't the rain, it wasn't the inconvenience, it wasn't even the accusation. It was the moment he realized evidence didn't matter until another officer made it matter. That's the line between law as a system and law as a mood. When verification becomes optional, freedom becomes fragile. And that brings us back to the blinking red light. The Dashcam. That small, steady pulse that turned a street-side accusation into an unbreakable record. Without it, Julian would have had his word against a report filled with phrases that sound official, a report that could have made him look suspicious on paper. But the camera didn't care about paper, it cared about time. And time showed what happened. An officer deciding, a man enduring, a second officer verifying what should have been verified first, and a city realizing that sometimes the most expensive thing you can do is let certainty replace evidence. Next, time you see a traffic stop on the side of the road, remember this. Somewhere inside that moment is a battle between verification and assumption, between procedure and pride, between the facts and the story someone wants to tell. On a wet night under streetlights, a black surgeon was told he stole his own car, and the city paid $4.5 million, not because the story was loud, but because the Dashcam made it undeniable.